Chris Brown, Steve Tasker with you live from the NFL Combine. And what better way to end the week, as we do almost every week during the regular season, here in the flesh, not on Zoom. Senior producer from NFL Films and co-host of ESPN's NFL Matchup show. It is the one and only Greg Cosell, who's got reports everywhere. He's typing them up. He's printing them out. He's bringing them with him. He's got his cheat sheets here. And I have to start with the receiver class, Greg, because the Bills probably are in the market for a number two receiver that's proven in the league, may cost too much. Can the Bills find a number two quality receiver that maybe if he's not ready week 1, might be ready by like week 6, 7, 8 to really contribute to this offense?
And I think that's something that they do need. I think that we know what Stephon Diggs is. We've talked about him, a great technician. He's clearly the number one with the Bills. But they've struggled, I think, over these last couple of years to really find that number two. At times it looked like it might be Gabe Davis, but at other times it hasn't really quite worked out. I think we'd probably all agree that in an ideal world he's probably a 3.
Yep.
So they're looking for that number two that has ideally 3-level ability. That's what you really want. Because even though we've seen Diggs get vertical, Diggs is not truly a vertical dimension. I mean, he can get vertical, as we've discussed, because of his route running ability and his ability to set up corners, because he's really good in and out of breaks. He's really good at getting corners to turn and to get off their spot. But at the end of the day, he's not a true vertical dimension. So they need a 3-level receiver who can be a complement but can be a factor.
Can you drop some names?
Yes, I can. And I think there's 2 that I particularly like based on because I've done a bunch of receivers. I would say that Jordan Addison, who started at Pitt and was phenomenal with Kenny Pickett and then played at USC this past year, I would say he's one name. Okay. And the other name, and this is a receiver that I ended up watching his 2020 targets, his 2021 targets, and his 2022 targets because I kept thinking he was going to come out, and he stayed, and that's Zay Flowers. Yeah. Now, you're dealing with Zay Flowers. We do have his height and weight because he was at the Senior Bowl, and his size, I don't want to say it scares some, but, in an ideal world, you'd probably like a receiver that's a little bigger because he was 5'9" and a quarter and 182. Addison, we don't have the confirmed yet. I guess they're doing that maybe today or tomorrow here at the Combine, so we don't have those confirmed numbers yet. He's certainly not going to be 200 pounds. He's another guy that's a little smaller as well.
195 would be great.
Correct. But I think both guys are somewhat technicians, relatively refined for college receivers. Mm-hmm. They do give you a 3-level dimension. Flowers is an explosive athlete. And, you can use Flowers and Addison on, jet sweeps, tunnel screens, bubble screens. They're good at those things as well. But they are 3-level guys that can get vertical.
Okay, now the second problem. Bills pick at 27.
Right.
Either one of those guys going to be there.
You know what? I think one of them will be. I can't sit here and say which one because receivers tend to be in the eye of the beholder. People always, Steve, as you know, want to make lists of receivers. I can't do that because I can't compare Zay Flowers at 5'9" and a quarter, 182 to Quentin Johnston, at 6'3" and a quarter and 215. I don't know how to compare those guys, so I can't make a list.
You don't have a team to fit them into.
Correct. Right. Yeah. So my guess is one of these guys will be there at 27. Now, I don't know how Brandon Beane and Sean McDermott think about these guys. I'm giving you, obviously my evaluation.
So
I got one right last year with James Cook. So,
that's right.
So, hey, who knows?
10 minutes after they picked him.
No, I told you before.
No, he's saying him and me.
Right.
With respect to these 2 receivers not being big, not the separation is a huge part. It has to be a huge part of their game if they're going to produce at the NFL level. So are you seeing enough consistent separation either at the top of the route or right off the snap if they're, if the guy's in off coverage, how are they getting off press man? I mean, I realize there's not a ton of press man.
There's usually not.
So what is your assessment of them in terms of consistent separation? Because we're envisioning, like from last year's offense for the Bills, the biggest thing that was missing, at least in my opinion, was the easy button throws for Josh.
Correct.
And so can
Correct.
one of these guys
Yes.
bring that to the Bills' offense?
And I think they can. You know, it's funny. And here's an individual I'm sure you know, T.J. Hushmanzada.
Sure.
Now, T.J. is now a trainer of receivers, and he is a big believer in the two things you just talked about. He said the most important things are release and then at the top of the route.
Right.
So you have to separate. And those two things are not necessarily a function of pure speed or, which is why a lot of these drills, particularly running the 40, I used to sit with a coach, you probably know, Al Saunders, very good friend of mine, and he said, I would love to actually see guys run a 40 in the position they would be leaving the line of scrimmage as opposed to in a track stance, because that's what they do in football. Right. But the point I'm making is you just hit on two things that are absolutely critical. And you can see my note here about Zay Flowers did not see many reps versus press man. So the question is, but you can help that with formation, with motions.
That's a learned technique.
Right.
You can teach that.
You can teach that.
Okay.
Yes.
So it's a little bit of a projection for Flowers because you haven't seen enough of it.
Right, and I think for most wide receivers in college football, particularly in all these spread offenses, you don't see a lot of press man. You just don't, because first of all, there aren't that many good corners, and college defenses don't play a lot of that.
Right.
Because the field is so big that depending on the formation, there's not a lot of help over the top. So you don't see a lot of press man.
Right. So give me an idea about a little bit further down the list. So if the Bills, go interior offensive lineman in the first round or whatever.
Yeah, and I haven't done a ton of these guys.
Yeah, you get down a little bit further down the list, and we've been told this receiver class lacks a Julio Jones.
It does.
Calvin
I had
Johnson,
a great conversation with a wide receiver coach the other night, and we both agreed there's no alpha dog in this class.
Right.
Which means that you can get receivers down the line, and then it depends, Brownie, as you were saying before we started doing this on the air, that what are you looking for? What kind of receiver do you want?
Right.
I mean, there's a receiver, and I have his notes too, that I absolutely loved, Jonathan Mingo from Ole Miss. Jonathan Mingo is 6'1", and this is because he was at the Senior Bowl, 6'1" and 3/8", 226. I really thought he was one of the most intriguing receivers I watched. I really liked him. You can line him up anywhere. Now, he's totally different from Flowers and Addison.
Right.
But I wouldn't be surprised if at this size, and he's going to run tomorrow on Saturday, it would not surprise me if he runs under 4.5.
Yeah, I just see, and the thing that I wrestle with is like, okay, we've got these nice guys, Addison and Flowers. Are they too closely aligned with the kind of receiver that Khalil Shakir is, who I think is going to make a nice jump here in year 2?
I would agree.
Because he finished the season very strong.
Yes.
And so it's like, well, are they locking themselves in? I mean, you hear best player available all the time, but if there's a cluster of receivers, do they lean more towards a size player like a Mingo who's 6'1" and 3/8", 226? I mean, that's a guy that's 40, almost 50 pounds bigger than Zay Flowers.
And great.
And do they need that more?
And it's a great point because, as you said it, something popped into my head. What do we know about Josh Allen? He's not shy about throwing the football. He's not a risk-averse thrower. He's going to throw it, okay? And
he's got arm arrogance.
That's a
what
great
Steve
phrase.
calls it.
That's a great phrase.
He'll fit
I'm going to steal that from you.
I stole it. So go ahead.
Okay, I'm going to then steal it from whoever you stole it from.
Yeah.
I love it. So anyway, so sometimes when you have a quarterback like that, you want a bigger receiver who can be more physical and more competitive going up to get the football because Josh is going to throw it.
Yeah. It's going to be whether you got separation or not.
Catch radius,
right,
those
right.
kinds of
So
things.
that's why receivers very often become in the eye of the beholder and in how the team sees it. Brownie, you could well be right. I mean, I love Flowers, okay? Loved his tape. Did him for 3 years. Really like Addison. Good prospects. But maybe they're going to look at a 5'9" and a quarter guy and say, that's not what we want right now.
We got 3 of them.
Yeah. Because if you recall, and we don't know what Shakir's going to do this year, although I think we'd agree based on what he did toward the end of the year, it looks like he's an upward trending player.
Yeah, and he's probably their slot guy.
Right. And if you recall, I really liked him going into last year's draft.
Right, yeah.
So I thought he could be a really good pro, and I think he will be the slot guy. And it seemed like Josh developed a little more confidence in him later in the year.
Yes, he did.
He was throwing him the football.
Yeah.
So, they may want to look at a guy like, again, I don't know if they like him or not. I do. But the fact is he's over 6'1" and he's 226, and he is put together, and he's super competitive.
What are we thinking in terms of his versatility, though, as a receiver? Is he limited to
no,
just being a Z? Or?
No. And I actually thought, I hate making these comparisons because people listening are going to think, oh, I'm saying he's the exact guy. And I'm not. That's not what I'm saying. But I think the way his body type is and the way he plays the game, there's a little A.J. Brown and Deebo Samuel to him.
Okay.
Now, again, I don't want people to say I'm saying, hey, he's that guy. He's going to step in and be Deebo Samuel day one. That's not my point. But he plays that way. He had great formation versatility. He lined up in many different spots.
Okay,
you
good.
could even line him up in the backfield, at times if you want to do some of that stuff.
So he's a guy that you don't have to throw it to him. You can hand it to him in certain
do some-
situations.
yeah,
you can do some stuff.
yes.
He's an athlete.
Yes, he's an athlete.
All right.
Yeah, I love that.
I'll sign up for that. Is there anybody, I don't know if you've gotten to tight ends yet, but this is a tight end class
I know.
that's getting a lot of hype.
I've just done Kincaid.
All right, so
I did Mayer last summer, not yet this year.
So let's talk about the tight end class this way, because I raised this point to Brandon Beane this week, and knowing, based on some of the people we've spoken with this week, there's a cluster of receivers at the end of round 1, top of round 2. They say the next tier may not come off the board till the bottom of round 2, early round 3. That's a big gap. So if you're a team that could use talent in the passing game,
right,
and the receiver value doesn't line up, how do you feel about pivoting and going to a pass-catching tight end to solve what you need in your passing game if receiver value is terrible where you're picking?
Here would be my question, and this now is a philosophical question that Ken Dorsey and Sean need to figure out. I've always liked Dawson Knox, okay, and I think you guys do too. I think he's a pretty athletic guy.
Yep.
I think he can work the intermediate levels. I think he can run the seam. He's a pretty athletic guy.
Absolutely.
To me, and again, I'm not in the meetings. I'm not part of the process, so I don't know how it all gets played out. But I feel like there's more that can be done with Dawson Knox. Now, maybe you want another tight end as well, particularly one that can spread the formation, and Dalton Kincaid is certainly that guy.
Yeah.
Now, I really love Dalton Kincaid's tape. I think ultimately what he is he's really more of a split tight end. Obviously he had to block a little bit. You can
But he's detached.
Yes, as long as guys want to, you can teach them blocking. I remember talking with a coach, in Kansas City about Tony Gonzalez early in his career. Wasn't a blocker at all, but he wanted to. So, so you become a good enough blocker.
Yeah, at least you got yourself a chance if you want to try.
Right.
Yeah.
But Dalton Kincaid, to me, and again, I'm not comparing him to Travis Kelce because Kelsey's going to be a first ballot Hall of Famer and arguably the best pass-catching tight end we've seen. But Kincaid can be used in that way. You can split him out. He can be a boundary X. I mean, you can use him in those kinds of ways.
Yeah. I mean, because the class goes pretty deep. You have your athletic freaks like Darnell Washington, and then you've got other guys that have great production.
Like Mike Mayer.
He might not be a high-end athlete, but he's a do-everything tight end. He comes on the field in 12 personnel with another tight end.
Right.
That defense says, well, they might run the ball, but they may throw it too. Do I want to put the third linebacker on the field, or do I want to stay in nickel?
And that gets into offensive philosophy again now with the run game, which we've talked about throughout the season. How do they see the run game now working as they go forward? A lot of people are pointing to what happened in the Super Bowl as an example, and then they point to the Bills. Look what happened in the second half.
Yeah.
They were down 10, and everybody probably assumed, hey, it's a Patrick Mahomes game. He's just going to come out and toss it all over the yard. And what did they do? They came out with maybe as diverse a run game as the Chiefs had shown all year.
Right.
And I mean, so
it's a problem.
Yeah.
And I think what happens is at the point where you get in these drafts, and like Brownie says, there are times when your guy gets snatched.
Yeah.
And you got to pivot,
as
you call it. You're not going to take an offensive player at all. You're going to take a corner. You're going to take a D-line. You're going to take a whatever linebacker. The Bills have a unique set of problems this year where they're going to miss their alpha dog linebacker, their alpha dog safety, who's been an all-pro. They've got some needs they've got to fill, and they're projecting this draft class in an offensive league against those needs. It's going to be a difficult problem.
Look, I mean, I think the assumption is, and you guys would know better than I being in the building, but I think the assumption is that Edmonds is not going to be back, right?
I think he's going to get priced out.
I think he's going to I think he's going to get a huge number.
Okay, and if that's the case, they need to fill that role. And, there is a player that I have watched, and he actually worked out yesterday, who I think just character-wise, stylistically would be really good for the Bills, and that's Jack Campbell. I really like Jack from Iowa.
Yeah.
I mean, I was sitting in the dome yesterday in the front row, and I even got to go on the field, and he's 6'5", legit. Maybe he's going to be 6'4" and whatever, but I mean, he's a big man.
Yeah.
And
he stands up, yeah.
And he is really, really good in the box. He's really smart. He actually tested better than I think a lot of people thought. I love his film, and unless he tested poorly, that wasn't going to be an issue for me. But he actually, I think of all the linebackers, he had the second best vertical jump. I mean, things that people look at.
Yeah.
You know how that goes, whether that means something or not. People do look at it. Yeah.
Particularly scouts, because they don't want to say, well, hey, the guy's the biggest why can't you do something with
Exactly.
It's not me, it's you.
Exactly.
So my job shouldn't be on the line.
So, to Steve's point, Brownie, maybe, because they're going to need to fill that position.
Yeah.
I mean, that's an important position in the defense.
No, it is. I was kind of thinking that they'll sign a free agent that's not as costly. Maybe like an Al Singleton from Denver, who's 30 years old, won't cost as much as a Tremaine Edmonds.
Right.
And then backfill with a draft choice, probably not high in the draft because they've got other needs that they have to fill. I mean, we'll have to see what they do in free agency. Safety's another position, and the safety class is weak.
I know.
So with that in mind, maybe I'm going to throw a couple of free agent names at you.
Go
Tell
ahead.
me what you think. I know Adrian Amos did not have a great season last year.
But he's a solid pro.
But he's a proven player.
The safety class is pretty deep, by the way, in free agency.
Yes,
There's
it is.
a lot of starting safeties in free agency.
Right.
So Adrian Amos was a guy I thought they could afford, 30 years old, not super costly. Thornhill's an intriguing guy from the Chiefs, much younger. He's probably looking to make big money. I don't know where the money's going to come in, but does anybody really appeal to you that isn't going to break the bank?
I'll tell you who I really like because I know him well, and I liked him going back 3 years before he became a full-time starter. I really like Marcus Epps.
Okay.
And I think he's interchangeable. I think
you're going to need that.
I think he can fit what the Bills want to do.
Okay.
And my sense is with this safety class in free agency, which is pretty good, that I'm not sure Epps is going to be at the top of the list money-wise.
Okay.
But I really like Marcus Epps.
Knowing what I know about the Bills and what I've seen them do in the past, there's going to be a name like these names we're talking about where Bills fans and the normal outside of the people, if we go down and look at the list, are going to say, they got Micah Hyde and Jordan Poyer. Those are the first two guys they signed. Who are they?
Right.
It's going to be kind of those, and they turn into guys that these guys feel like fit their system and they're going to flourish.
The other player I really like, Brownie, but he may be a little more of a true box guy. I think that's his strength. I think he can play on the back end, but I don't know if that's his strength. I really like Donovan Wilson.
Okay.
I think his tape's really good. He's physical. He's a swagger guy. He brings a swagger to your defense.
Okay.
Now, I think he can play on the back end. I just don't know if that's where you'd want to play him a lot.
Yeah. Physical downhill player. Can he play in the back? Can he cover the deep half?
He shows up on film
Michael
all
will do
the
the
time.
deep half. So,
but he shows up on film all the time.
Okay. How old is he? Because I don't even know what his age is.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't think he's played a long time. I can't imagine he's.
Oh yeah, 2019 draft.
Yeah.
All right. I'll listen to that. Because I think I think Poyer is going to be priced out of their market as well. So I really don't expect Edmonds
and it sounds
or Poyer
like, look,
back.
I know it always comes down to money, but Poyer's been making a lot of comments, about
the taxes and
where he wants to play and all that. So who knows, but I don't think they'll re-sign him either.
So I know you mentioned Jack Campbell. Drew Sanders is another linebacker.
Who I haven't done yet. But
the Alabama transfer went to Arkansas, became a team captain, really lit it up there. The dichotomy there in terms of an opinion on him is he flashes so much as a pass rusher that I'm wondering if there are going to if the demand for him is going to be that much greater, because there might be some 3-4 teams that see him as an outside linebacker rush off the edge guy, which would be a new thing for him
though he
full
played,
time.
mostly stacked, but he did show he could rush the quarterback.
Right, and so then so my concern is that guy flies off the board, because not only are 4-3 teams interested in what he can do as a middle, but now you got 3-4 teams that might say, you know what, we can work with that.
Right. Well, it's a money spot too. You got edge rushers, corners, QBs.
Those are the money spots.
Yeah. And it's just like quarterbacks get pushed to the front of the draft. So do these other money positions. Guys get overdrafted, and when you got a guy that's got that kind of ability and those kind of measurables, teams will take a chance on him.
Yep.
Greg, good to be with you. Thanks for making time for us and joining us on yet another
it's
Friday.
great to be with you guys in person.
We'll catch up with you as we get closer to the draft,
for sure.
and you've got more of these lovely sheets for us to work with and cheat off of.
By the time the draft comes, I'll have 250 of these.
That's great.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. Back in the tunnel or the basement
That's
or the
right,
cave.
that's
or
right.
whatever. What you got to have like a nickname for your little office, right? You call it the cave? I'm sure your wife's got a nickname for it. What does she call it?
I don't call it anything. It's just I've got my setup because I don't work at home. I live 9 minutes from the office. I probably work 70 hours a week, but I don't work at home. Because I can go to the office.
Right.
Yeah.
Even on weekends, it's 9 minutes. It's no big deal.
It's like going for a loaf of bread.
Yeah, so that's what I do. I've got my whole setup. I'm comfortable. That's the way I do it.
All right. Well, enjoy your meeting with coaches and talking ball here this weekend.
Yep.
We know you're doing some of that.
Yep.
And we'll catch up with you as we get closer to the draft.